Late yesterday evening, I want to share news of a genuine fracture, one that arrived quietly in state party offices across the nation and was largely drowned out by louder stories about courtroom drama and campaign rallies. Still, it shouldn't be dismissed. What took place in RNC conference rooms over the past 72 hours marks the first visible rupture in the organizational machinery that has sustained Donald Trump's grip on the Republican Party for nearly a decade. Legal experts and political insiders who closely track party infrastructure have documented something extraordinary. 22 state Republican parties, representing roughly $180 million in combined operational budgets, have formally declared they will not participate in Trump's proposed nomination process modifications. At a glance, this could be mistaken for routine intra-party squabbling, another disagreement about procedural minutiae. But this was never about scheduling conflicts or delegate allocation formulas. It's about the fundamental question of whether one man can rewrite the rules of American democracy to guarantee his own coronation. What follows will uncover the parts of this episode most people haven't seen. At a glance, this could be mistaken for a mundane fight over party bylaws, another squabble about committee procedures and parliamentary rules. But this was never about administrative technicalities. It's about whether the Republican Party remains a democratic institution or transforms into an authoritarian vehicle designed to serve a single individual's interests. What follows will uncover the parts of this episode most people haven't seen, why Trump became so intent on restructuring the entire nomination architecture, why state party chairs responded with such unprecedented defiance, and why the RNC itself, an institution that has frequently bent itself into knots defending what would once have been indefensible, finally witnessed a rebellion it could neither contain nor suppress. To understand how we arrived at this moment, the sequence of events matters. Roughly 6 weeks ago, not long after Trump's mounting legal expenses approached $87 million in accumulated costs, RNC leadership circulated what they characterized as a routine proposal for streamlining primary procedures. It was framed publicly as efficiency enhancement, a way to reduce voter confusion and accelerate the nomination timeline. Buried in its language, however, was a mechanism that would have granted Trump's campaign unprecedented control over delegate selection committees, primary debate scheduling, and most significantly, the authority to modify victory thresholds in individual states. Constitutional scholars who reviewed the leaked documents described the proposal as nothing less than an attempt to engineer a predetermined outcome while maintaining the facade of democratic competition. What followed went far beyond administrative reform. The objective was never efficiency. It was the systematic elimination of competitive uncertainty. The plan proposed granting the Trump campaign direct oversight of credential committees in 38 states, authority to approve or reject debate moderators, and most alarmingly, the power to adjust plurality requirements in winner-take-all states based on what internal documents called strategic necessity considerations, or court insiders who have tracked Trump's pattern of institutional capture immediately recognized the architecture. This wasn't party reform. It was a hostile takeover disguised as procedural modernization. There were even proposals to redirect approximately $94 million in state party infrastructure funding toward what documents described as centralized campaign support operations that would function under Trump campaign supervision. County-level organizations across Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina were slated for defunding, with resources reallocated to Trump-controlled entities operating under shell organizations with innocuous names like Republican Victory Initiative and Patriot Coalition Fund. Put plainly, this amounted to the financial starvation of any infrastructure that might support alternative candidates while enriching mechanisms Trump personally controlled. At this point, the behavior moved beyond aggressive campaign strategy and into potential violation of Federal Election Commission regulations governing party coordination territory. That shift is precisely what attorneys general in 7 states identified after reviewing the financial architecture. After examining banking records obtained through routine campaign finance disclosures, a clear pattern emerged. The so-called efficiency reforms were designed to route state party donations through accounts that would technically maintain separation from Trump's personal campaign while functionally operating as extensions of it, thereby circumventing contribution limits and coordination restrictions that apply to individual candidates. The financial routing scheme explains what happened at exactly 2:47 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday afternoon. In a coordinated action that political analysts describe as unprecedented in modern party history, chairs of 22 state Republican parties, representing states as diverse as Utah, Maine, Alaska, and Georgia, released a joint statement declaring they would not implement the proposed nomination modifications. The statement emphasized that state parties exist to serve Republican voters, not to guarantee predetermined outcomes for favored candidates. The language was measured but unequivocal. We will conduct primaries according to existing rules developed through democratic processes, not according to mandates designed to benefit a single campaign. Former RNC officials who served under 6 different party chairs characterized this as the most significant internal rebellion in Republican Party history since the progressive conservative split of 1912, which brings us to the RNC leadership itself. For much of the past year, party officials have displayed what observers politely characterize as extraordinary flexibility in accommodating Trump's demands, from covering millions in legal bills to modifying debate requirements to essentially clearing the field of serious opposition. So, what shifted? Why did state party chairs at this particular moment choose to break ranks and risk Trump's legendary vindictiveness? It had nothing to do with a newfound commitment to democratic principles, though the public statements naturally frame it that way. The real reason is political survival instinct combined with recognition that Trump's legal and financial vulnerabilities have transformed him from an asset into an escalating liability. In Washington and in state capitals across America, authority rests as much on perception as on position. When major donors across 7 states quietly withdrew pledges totaling approximately $340 million after Trump's civil fraud judgment, when polling showed him trailing in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, states he must win, and when state legislative candidates began privately pleading for separation from the Trump brand, it sent an unmistakable message: association with Trump now threatens down-ballot survival. This episode marks one of the clearest signs yet that Trump's grip on Republican institutional machinery is weakening in ways that even 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. It's among the first real indications that party operatives, facing the prospect of catastrophic November losses, are already calculating post-Trump futures. Still, it would be reckless to underestimate the danger ahead. A political figure who feels cornered, who sees organizational infrastructure slipping from his control, and who faces mounting financial penalties approaching $550 million when you combine civil judgments with projected legal costs, does not accept institutional rejection quietly. The cultural consequences are equally significant. Trump targeted the nomination process itself because he understands a simple but powerful truth. Controlling how parties select candidates is a direct route to controlling who holds power. His goal was to overwrite the Republican Party's competitive primary tradition, one built on voter choice, grassroots activism, and bottom-up delegate selection, with a narrative rooted in loyalty tests, top-down control, and predetermined coronations. The 22 state parties may have stopped the immediate structural takeover, but they cannot end the larger struggle for the soul of American political parties. That battle is playing out in state legislatures across Arizona and Wisconsin, where Trump allies are proposing laws that would give party leadership, meaning Trump loyalists, authority to override primary election results they deem irregular. It's happening in county Republican organizations throughout Pennsylvania and Georgia, where credentials committees are being stacked with activists willing to challenge delegate legitimacy based on loyalty rather than vote totals. The attempt to restructure RNC nomination procedures was merely the most visible tip of the iceberg. This is not about one primary cycle. This is about whether political parties in America remain membership organizations that reflect voter preferences or transform into autocratic structures that manufacture consent for predetermined outcomes. And let this serve as a clear message to those in power. We are watching the money. We are watching the rule changes. We are watching the credential challenges. We will not allow democratic institutions to be liquidated piece by piece and replaced with authoritarian machinery designed to guarantee perpetual control for those who already hold it. Still, it would be reckless to underestimate the danger ahead. A former president who feels cornered, who sees even his own party's infrastructure rebelling against his demands, and who faces staggering financial pressures that only intensify with each passing week, is not a diminished threat. Trump has never accepted institutional rejection quietly. He doesn't interpret organizational resistance as legitimate democratic pushback. He interprets it as betrayal, demanding retribution. The next 72 hours matter. With traditional RNC mechanisms now partly beyond his control and roughly $87 million in legal bills continuing to accumulate monthly, his financial and organizational vulnerabilities have only intensified. Pressure shapes behavior, and when established party infrastructure fractures and traditional funding channels show resistance, attention inevitably shifts toward less regulated alternatives. Super PACs operating outside party oversight, dark money networks that escape transparency requirements, and perhaps most concerning, foreign-linked cryptocurrency operations that bypass traditional campaign finance structures entirely. Which brings us back to the warning about Trump's increasingly erratic financial maneuvering. Watch for emergency appeals that blur lines between legal defense funds and campaign operations designed to exploit donor confusion. Expect sudden pivots toward unregulated fundraising mechanisms that constitutional watchdogs have already flagged as potentially illegal. Anticipate attacks on the 22 state party chairs who dared to resist, possibly including primary challenges funded through Trump-controlled PACs, or even legal harassment disguised as fraud investigations. Desperation doesn't retreat, it adapts. We may also witness attempts to bypass state parties entirely by building parallel organizational structures, efforts to intimidate wavering state chairs through social media campaigns and rally denunciations, or maneuvers to pack the RNC itself with loyalists willing to override state party objections. Today's state party rebellion represents a clear win for institutional independence and democratic norms, but it also raises the stakes. It increases the temptation to pursue authoritarian shortcuts when democratic processes refuse to guarantee desired outcomes. To the citizens who have felt powerless watching one man's hostile takeover of an entire political party, I want to speak directly. I know how easy it is to feel like the institutions designed to preserve democratic competition are faltering under relentless pressure. I know the disillusionment of seeing party organizations that once prided themselves on grassroots participation transformed into vehicles for authoritarian ambition. But look at what has occurred. Look at the scoreboard. 22 state Republican parties, representing regions as diverse as libertarian-leaning Western states and traditional conservative Southern strongholds, stood firm against demands that would have transformed primaries into coronations. Yes, the RNC leadership remains largely complicit, and Trump retains enormous influence over party messaging and fundraising. But the institutional machinery itself has shown it can still resist. That should remind us that if state party organizations can defend their independence against the most powerful figure in Republican politics, so too can democracy itself survive the authoritarian moment we're living through. We cannot safeguard primary integrity while ignoring broader threats to democratic institutions. Across every level of party organization, across every mechanism of candidate selection, facts must guide us, and voter choice must prevail over loyalty demands. Those state party chairs who stood firm against Trump's nomination process takeover must show the same courage when he inevitably attacks them, threatens primary challenges against their chosen candidates, or attempts to cut off their funding. And let this serve as a clear message to those in power. We are watching the credential committees. We are watching the rule change proposals. We are watching the dark money flows. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation, constant vigilance, and courage from every one of us, including from those within party structures who still believe democratic competition matters more than guaranteed outcomes. If this breakdown helped cut through the noise and explain what's truly at stake in this internal party battle, consider subscribing. Sustaining analysis that prioritizes institutional preservation over partisan cheerleading is essential during moments like this. I'd like to hear how you see it. Do you believe Republican Party institutions can ultimately resist Trump's takeover attempts, or has the transformation into an authoritarian vehicle already progressed too far? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. This story is far from over.